Imagine being declared dead, only to walk out of your own funeral. This is the unbelievable true story of Lazarus Lake, a man who cheated death itself. Lazarus Lake had always been an energetic and adventurous young man, full of dreams and hope for the future. He came from a small town in the heart of America, where his family was well loved and respected. The townspeople knew Lazarus as a hardworking man with a big heart. He loved sports, loved being around friends, and most importantly, he was someone who always lived in the moment. Little did he know that life would soon be disrupted by the global epidemic that was the Spanish flu. The flu struck without warning, making its way through the town and sweeping through his family. Lazarus fell ill, his body succumbing to fever and weakness. In the weeks that followed, he grew weaker. His once vibrant personality was overshadowed by the disease that robbed him of his strength. He spent his final days in bed trying to survive, while his family watched helplessly. As Lazarus' health rapidly declined, his family was forced to watch him fade away. His mother's voice echoed through his fevered dreams, telling him to hold on, that it wasn't his time. But the fever took over, his mind slipping in and out of consciousness. Lazarus could hear the voices around him, doctors, family members, friends, each one slowly acknowledging that he was slipping away. It wasn't until the doctor made his final call that the family gave up hope. Lazarus was dead. The decision was made quickly. The family mourned, and plans for his funeral began immediately. They wrapped his body in a shroud, laid him in a coffin, and arranged for a service to say goodbye. While Lazarus was lying still in his coffin, death had not yet fully claimed him. In his final moments, Lazarus experienced a strange peace. He was drifting in and out of consciousness, unsure of where he was or what was happening. For a fleeting moment, Lazarus was no longer tied to the world. He found himself in a space of warmth and stillness, with no pain, no illness. His mind wandered, wondering if he was crossing into the afterlife. But the feeling was not one of fear, it was relief. As if death was a kind companion guiding him to an unknown but peaceful place. But just as his spirit seemed ready to depart, something stirred within him. A jolt of will. Something deep in his gut. A sudden awareness of life returned to him, pushing him back from the brink. As the ceremony was about to begin, Lazarus suddenly opened his eyes. The room, filled with mourners, gasped in horror and disbelief. Lazarus himself felt a sense of confusion wash over him. He wasn't dead. He was alive. But how? How was he alive? What had happened to him in those moments between life and death? Lazarus sat up slowly, the air around him heavy with shock. His family and friends, who had just begun to accept his death, now saw him, sitting before them, very much alive. He was weak, his body battered from the illness, but there was a certain grace in his recovery that bewildered everyone. The mourners thought they had seen a ghost. They hadn't been prepared for this. Lazarus himself wasn't prepared for it. As Lazarus regained strength, he began to struggle with his emotions. Was he truly alive? Was this just some cruel illusion? He could feel the warmth of his family's embrace, but the experience of death lingered in his mind. Why had he been brought back? The physical strength in his limbs returned over time, but his mind was still shaken. What did it mean to live after being dead? Lazarus grappled with this question as he slowly rejoined the world. He would look at the people around him, trying to understand what it meant to be part of their world again. How could he re-enter a life he had once known, knowing what he had just been through? It was an internal struggle that lingered with him, even as the world around him celebrated his return. As Lazarus recovered, he often found himself thinking back to the moments he had experienced before his return to life. In the stillness of death, there had been no pain, no suffering, and no fear. He had felt at peace, as if everything had aligned perfectly in that brief, eternal moment. But now that he was back, the weight of the world seemed heavier than ever. Lazarus gradually realized that his return to life wasn't just about his physical body, but about something greater. He wasn't just meant to be alive for the sake of living. He had been given a second chance. A chance to understand life in a way he had never before. With each passing day, he felt the weight of gratitude and began to embrace life again. He married Sarah, the love of his life, who had never given up on him, even in the darkest of moments. Together, they built a family. Lazarus shared his incredible story with anyone who would listen, becoming a symbol of resilience and hope in the face of despair. Over the years, Lazarus' story became one of inspiration. He spoke at public gatherings, telling his tale of death and resurrection. People who had heard of his story were moved by his resilience and his ability to see life from a new perspective. Lazarus had faced death. And not only had he survived, but he had lived. He had learned to embrace each day, not take his existence for granted, and live with an overwhelming sense of purpose. Lazarus lived a full, fruitful life. He became a father, a mentor, and a symbol of one's strength and resilience. He had been brought back from the dead for a reason, and he spent every day making the most of that second chance. As Lazarus grew older, he often looked back at the moments when he was believed to be dead, reflecting on how much he had been given. His second life was not just a return to physical existence, but an opportunity to shape his own future. One filled with love, family, and purpose. Death no longer held power over him. He had conquered it in a way few could even imagine. In his later years, Lazarus continued to share his story, but not just as a miraculous event. He spoke about the fragility of life, and how we must cherish every moment, even when everything seems bleak. His life was no longer defined by death, but by the understanding that life is fragile and precious. Lazarus understood now that, even in the darkest time, there is always the possibility of hope, the possibility of rebirth. Legacy Thread, uncovering the hidden stories of history. Subscribe to Legacy Thread, where history's most astonishing stories come alive, because sometimes the impossible really does happen.